Hi friends, and welcome to my weekly stream about the Uno platform. Live coding about everything that happens with the Uno platform. So sometimes taking a look at bugs, taking a look at issues. My name is Jérôme Laban. I'm the CTO of the open source project of the same name, and we'll be spending about an hour doing a few things around the Uno platform, and specifically today looking at what we've been doing for the past few weeks, which is adding the C# support for the Uno platform playground. And because for now it only just does C# XAML, and then we're going to be adding C# along the way. So let me do this because last week I forgot about it. Now I'm a bit smaller on the screen. It's going to be easier. And so just for the people that have been following, we released a few weeks ago Uno platform update for .NET 6 mobile preview 14. Some of you have been trying it out, and giving feedback. This has been very interesting because there are still a few issues around the use of .NET 6 mobile preview 14, specifically around iOS and Catalyst. We're getting to those updates, and we hope that the upcoming update for .NET 6 Mobile RC1 is going to help a lot of this. Specifically, if you take a look at the repo that the .NET team has been publishing, so if you go to, I think it's called Xaml, it's Mac iOS, GitHub Xaml, let's say. If you take a look at the issues that were closed recently for the breaking changes, so there's that one. So about the breaking changes, so it was mentioned here. So there were a few breaking changes, but there are also a few other things that were mentioned in the MAUI repository, if I remember correctly. If we were to go take a look at the releases, for the last preview, and if you take a look at that release specifically at the end, there are lots of steps that need to be executed, and we're waiting on the next pre-release to fix this and make sure that you're able to run your CI pipelines properly without having to jump through hoops like it's the case at this time. So it works if you follow our instructions, but if you try to make something that cross targets general .NET development, that may be causing you some trouble. So you can try it, but there's still some caveats there, and it's going to be fixed soon, we hope. So let's go to the Uno Playground. So the Uno Playground, if you don't know about it, it's the application that we're publishing that allows to give access to the features from the .NET, the Uno platform UI specifically, and you basically write your XAML here, and the output comes out on the right side. You can do some data binding here, like for instance, I can change the content here, and it will update automatically on the other side. It will do the same thing if I change, let's say, for example, the font here. If I put a very large font, it's going to get bigger right away when I change the content. So what's missing in that application is the fact that we can't write some C# in there, even though everything's built on C#. And the biggest issue here is that we need to integrate a compiler there to be able to have some C# running, because it's all about WebAssembly, and WebAssembly is all about running on your machine, not using any kind of resources that come from the server side, because hosting that application, for instance, costs us I don't know about in US dollars, probably $9 a month, something like that, using Azure Static Apps. It's very small for a cost of that, for an application of that size, especially because it's backed by a very large CDN, so that's very nice. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So last week, what we did, and let's start the application as it was last week. So we see the difference there. So let's rebuild it and see what we can get when we're building the application. So what we're getting in this application is the playground with an additional section. And in that section, what we're doing is putting some C# code, and then we're embedding in the application. We're adding the C# compiler, so Roslyn, the full compiler. And we're taking the C# code that's inside the application and running it as part of the application that's available in your browser. So if I click this, and if I go, let's say, so I don't have any output window for now, so we're going to be taking a look at the output here, and we can see here that when I ran the application, the code that is here, so that says hello, was compiled, and you can see it says hello here. So if I change this and put something else, let's say test, and I click, so I need to change that. So here, if I click run again, you can see that I got emitting assembly, and then I get the new text that's available here. And last week, what we tried is that for that code that is available in there, we had the ability to add some classes and execute code from those classes. Now, what we weren't able to do is something that looks like this. So let's say if I do my control, and I say that it inherits from, let's take a control that looks easy. Oh, let's take a grid for now. Let's take a grid. So if I do this and I recompile the application, so you're going to be changing this so that it runs every time. You can see that my C# doesn't compile because it says that there's a type that is missing. So it says type of namespace definition end of file detected. There's probably something that I missed. Yes, so I need to be having a class. So let's rebuild something. And I got the compilation, and it says the type of namespace grid was not found. And there's a good reason for it. It's because of the fact that the integration of the assemblies that are built as part of the compiler, that are used as part of the compiler, are only the .NET runtime files. They're not they're not including anything that is related to UNO. So what we're going to do is integrate all the UNO files inside of the assemblies that we can load from the compiler, so that we can get something that looks interesting. Even if I use the whole thing. So let's say it's not just grid, it's Windows.UI, and then XAML Windows.UI, that's XAML, that I'm going to get there. Control-Z-Grid. I make a small modification here, compile again. It says type Windows doesn't exist. So we're going to do two things. First, it's annoying that I have to change the XAML here, so it's not particularly nice. So we're going to do this, and we're also going to add a small text box here at the bottom, so we don't have to go there. Actually, it's easy because we have a bit more information there, so let's keep it that way. So we're going to be just changing the fact that if we change the text here, it actually recompiles. It's going to be easier. So if we take a look at the code editor that was there originally, so the text pane, the XAML text here, we're going to search for the uses of that one in the playground and see where we are changing this. And we have a size change here. So size change, we have a text changed here. There's probably another text change that's available somewhere. Where do we have changes here? So we have some changes there. Let's see, we have another one. So we have loaded, size change, and text change. So interestingly, we don't have any other. Maybe we have... we have property change, so it could be on the property change that we're looking at this. Let's see. Yes, so we're hooking on property change to see which property has changed, and then we're updating the UI. So we're going to be doing the same thing for the throttling, and see, we're going to be basically calling this one because it's going to be the same event. So if we search for the control that contains the source, which is the source code box, we're going to be hooking on the event the same way. So let's do this for this one. So it's code box, and then there's going to be text changed, and we're going to be calling the same method that we had for the property change. So this one here, probably should be enough. There we go. Okay, so we have the text change. So now it's going to be updating every time we change the property. Hey, McNets, thanks for joining. So we're modifying the Uno playground to add C# in there. So Abdallah says Net6 iOS, Net6 Catalyst, and macOS are not working. Make sure that you follow this discussion specifically to make sure that you have the whole story. Oop, apologies, not this one. So you have the discussion here, support for Visual Studio 2022 17.2. If you follow all the steps that are here, especially the ones that are at the top, I've put a lot of information to ensure that you're installing the right environment on both your Mac and your Windows machine. If you don't follow those steps specifically, it will do all sorts of weird stuff. So make sure to follow them. And if you have anything that doesn't work, you put some additional comment there in the output, in the discussion. Okay, so I've changed the text here. Now what I want to do is add some additional files so that we can compile something. So last week I talked about adding NuGet packages, like let's say if I add something at the top that says, let's add the files that are placed inside of a NuGet package. So we could probably do something like this. Let's see how we could do something like this. Let's say, well, let's start see if it works properly, and then we're gonna go to the updates and see if we have something of interest there. So we have in here the source for C#. We have a lot of stuff actually, and we don't have Uno. So let's go add Uno. So we're gonna have to match the version that we have for the playground for now, at least. So the way we're gonna be doing this is, actually, let's do it differently. Do we have dependencies available there? So we have the playgrounds, we have Uno. So it's Uno WebAssembly. So we can take that version. So it's 420.5. And what I want to have is all the files that are compile time assembly. So all those files that are here. And I think we can get access to the path from here. There we go. That's very nice. So we're going to take all those files. Well, I don't think we need the PDB files, but at least the DLL files. And we are going to put them in, let's see, do we put them in the same folder, or do we put them in a different folder? If I remember correctly, we're doing something here to build the list of files. We have my SDK files that are .NET SDK source file. Let's actually do a second one. So we're going to make a second folder. That is going to be called Uno source, let's say, for now. Let's call it Uno SDK source. I'm going to put the files there, and we're going to add those files manually here. So what that will do, it's essentially taking the files that I'm putting in here and giving them as a reference files that are going to be used to compile the C# that we're putting in the playground. So let's do a build first and see if we have the file list updating properly. It should be this time. I think 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, we were doing the kind of modifications. So the files list was not the right one. So we're going to be seeing if the updated list contains Uno. Okay, so we have Uno SDK source here. The problem is that I think we're gonna have some problems there because we're renaming a few files, but we're gonna change this. So the build works, but I think we're gonna be searching for those files specifically, and they're probably not the right ones. So in the compiler, I think we're doing some replacement. There you go. Do we need? So we do load references. So we're taking all the files that are in the file list. It's probably going to work. .NET SDK. No, we need to replace. So let's replace the same thing. So we said Uno SDK source. We're going to be replacing this for now. So let's try it and see if we can have some content. Oh, and first, because I don't want to rewrite that every time, we're going to be changing the default console.writeLine that we put as a default text here for the source box. We're going to be using, we're going to be putting some code in there directly. Let's do something like this for now. I'm going to put a file in the, we're going to put a file in the embedded resources afterwards so that it makes it a bit easier. So we'd have to double quote because we're in a string literal. And, oh, that was not a quote. There you go. Okay, so what we want is the ability to add a new class. So let's say it's a Windows UI Xaml controls grid. And inside, I'm just going to be making a new constructor that will probably do nothing, but we'll see if it compiles. But to see if we actually do have something that is of interest here, we're going to be adding a control in the children. So let's do children.add new. Actually, let's put Windows XAML controls as a namespace at the top. It's going to make everything easier. And so that we can remove. Okay, let's see if this compiles. So this should do. So now the interesting thing is that I was talking about NuGet packages. The idea is that we have the Uno SDK source here, but those files are coming from a NuGet package. So what we could do is just add a reference to a NuGet package and then background everything. So does it mean that we'll have to build a WinUI version of the playground? Yes, we will have to be doing this. That's definitely something that we have to do. It's definitely not there currently, and it's a UWP version of it, so we'll have to update that. So we can see here that the .NET uno.clr file is not there. And there's probably a good reason for this. I'm not sure which one. Maybe we're not renaming the files properly. That could definitely be. So let's see here. We have the playground files here that are in that folder. If we take a look at the output folder where the files are placed, let's see if they're really here. So in the package, we have the .NET SDK. We have the files list here, which contains what we need at the end. There you go. It's Uno SDK source. And do we have the Uno files there? We don't. Okay, so that's probably why it doesn't work. So why don't we have the files? I probably missed something here, including SDK file. Did I miss something here? Ah, yes, there's that one. So we have to add the content files there. So let's do the same thing here. Uno SDK source, DLL, and this should be placed in .NET SDK. Yes, .NET SDK folder. Let's see if I rebuild. Let's see if I have the files integrated in the SDK. Should be this time. Okay, so do I have the files there now? Okay, I do have Uno. A lot of others actually. Uno injectable and a few others. So am I in the right folder? No, I'm not in the right folder. Should be in this folder. And .NET SDK. Do I have Uno here? We do. Okay. So if we take a look at the application, do we have something there? We do. Okay. and the application is actually compiled. So that's very good. That means that the code that we put there was compiled, and that everything is actually working properly. So that's very good. Now, the thing is that we have an assembly. Now we do need an entry point somewhere, because we have to be able to take what the code is doing here and show something somehow. So there are multiple ways to do this, and I wonder. So we could expose a global property, or we could put a static member somewhere that says, you know, this is the root. So let's say something like this. I could say that my file here. Can I put my file? Oh, we can see here that when I'm changing the code, it updates. So that's very nice. So if I say hello2, I got hello2. So the cool thing is that, you know, it's compiling all this, and it takes 100 milliseconds. So that's very nice. It's super fast. So we're getting there. So now what we need to do is replace basically the content that's in there. I don't know if we're going to be able to do all that kind of thing. So there's multiple things that we could do. We could say that the file that is here, let's say should have the ability to be a top level file with a class. So if we take a look at the way the XAML is generated, there in the playground, when there's something that changes, we're building something up. So let's see. If I go to, so the text change, let's go to the text change here. Text changed, and then we say we have the throttle that doesn't make that much change, and then we have the update method, and the update method is going to be doing a lot of things. So it's compiling, but it's also, there's a few other things that are done. There's a Xaml Reader with the Xaml input here, and in the Xaml input, what we're doing is basically doing this. So we're wrapping the code that you're putting in the XAML pane with a grid, basically, and that gives a set of namespace of known namespaces, but it doesn't allow you to have a class. So when you're creating a file in XAML, you should be able to place this at the top. So what should we do here? I think we should be changing the fact that, let's actually do this. We say if we don't have anything there, so let's say we remove everything from the grid, we just return a text that's in the XAML. So if there's a, let's see, if code box text, if there's text in the code box, let's do it that way, we're going to be returning something, and if there isn't, we're going to be returning something else. Okay, so let's do this way. So if there's text in the source box, so we're saying so if there's no text in the code box, we're going to be returning the same thing as we did before. And if there is, we're just going to be returning the text that's directly inside of the code in the XAML code box. Okay, so that's the first one. Now what we want to do is say that the code that we wrote before, so the code that we put in there, the text block that is here, we're going to say that we want that control to be shown as a control that is going to be directly in the view that we have on the right. Let's say we put hello here. So what it should do is just show hello just one way without anything inside. So in here I have my class. It's not a namespace, but we can try. So let's see what we can do with this. We have the application that we can start. So we're going to change the XAML that's inside the application, and we're going to ask the Xaml Reader to load the class that we've defined here and place its content in the right side here. Okay, so it says stack panel. Okay, so stack panel doesn't exist, which is expected in that context. So we're going to take the code for a default page. So let's take the playground page, for instance. So it's going to be, let's take this at the top. And let's do some space. Okay. So I have here. So what am I missing here? Okay, so it compiles, which is good. Now the problem is that here is that that class here is not the right one. So what we're going to need to do is ask the XAML compiler to use my control instead of playground. So if I do this, what happens? So far, nothing. So that's interesting. So it could be, what could it be? Does it find the class? It could be that it doesn't find the class. So to do this, we're going to have to figure out if there's a notion at namespace. That could be. So let's go take a look at the source for Uno to see if we can find what this does. Because it's supposed to be to go and take the file. So let's actually try another thing. So if I do, if I create a control that's called my control here, and I do this, does it build? So if I remove this, what do we have? Oh, there you go. We have hello. Okay, so the control was created. So that's very nice. So it does not work. So it's not, so partials don't make sense there. That's interesting. So partials don't make sense there because we're not generating any code. There's no generator there. So there could be, but there isn't at this point. And it's not like it's running inside of the normal flow for building. So there's no code generation of any kind that happens there. This is loaded through the Xaml Reader, and this is executed as is. So it has to be some class that needs to be there. So what we need to do now, because this doesn't do anything, and it should have been. Actually, it could be because the base class is not the same. Could be something like this. And probably gonna have to find that one out. Because the base type is not the right one, so could be. But the interesting thing is that our control actually loaded. So if we change this and we'd say hello 2, does it update? So it does not. And that could be one of the first issues that we're going to have to figure out, is the fact that the control here is going to be loaded multiple times. So the class is not going to be replaced. It's going to be a brand new one. So the loading code is not going to find the right version of it. So we may have to find a few things. So I say control 2. Let's say control 2 here. And if I say my control 2, it does say hello 2. Okay, so that's particularly interesting. It means that because we're basically loading assemblies as we go, we're not removing the assemblies once they're loaded. It's not an API that's part of the APIs that are from the reflection. Now, maybe what we could do is use the assembly load context. But if we do this, then we may have issues with removing assemblies once they're loaded. So that could be something that is interesting. So if we go take a look at what the Uno playground is, the Uno XAML Reader is doing, we're going to try to figure out what's being loaded, and if we could, let's say, forget about a specific assembly when we're overriding one assembly with another. That could be something like this. Otherwise, we may be starting to have a few issues with trying to find which type is the right one. So let's go find this here. So we're net standard 2. Let's go for Skia. So we have the target framework override, something that allows to load the UNO solution with just a set of the assemblies of the projects. And let's see. So if we search for the Xaml Reader, I'm going to dive into this one and see what we are doing to read all this. That's not the right Xaml Reader. So we have two ones. There's one from Uno XAML and the other one is from system.xaml, which is not the right one. We want the one that's from Uno UI XAML markup reader. That's the one. And the one that does the job is the XAML object builder. And in there, we're going to find a few methods, especially one that's, if we're going to take a look here, there's a XAML type resolver. And in that class, we have a lot of stuff, and particularly one that's interesting, which is called get type, somewhere in there. Visual Studio doesn't freeze. Hey, Brian, thanks for joining. You want to do some UWP XAML or WinUI XAML? We're actually deep in the weeds of this, the Roslyn compiler, so trying to figure out how we can do some C# parsing and loading some XAML from Xaml Reader and try to get that loaded, and emitting assemblies inside of the browser so that we can get some fancy code loaded up in the browser. So, very, very cool stuff. So we're trying to find how we can get multiple assemblies not loading, so that the XAML reader is able to find the right type even though it's loaded multiple times. Yeah, a Prism module that does it. If indeed. I don't know if Prism does some wrapping of the Roslyn compiler. I don't think it does. I haven't seen something like this. So we have source find type by name. So what this does basically is take the string that is here and tries to find the runtime type that's associated to it. So the way we do this is by doing things like assembly.getType here. So assembly is for lookup assemblies. I mean, there's another one that looks up in the app domain, the current app domain, and we're searching using assemblies right there. So that's not the right way to do it. Or at least we should be having something that makes it easier to look up. So maybe we should be filtering out a few things. So we're basically, when we're looking this, we can see here that we're doing a first row default. A first row default is not the right one. So, so that's probably something that we're going to have to fix inside of Uno, but we're not going to be doing it today. Otherwise, it would be a problem. So to do this, maybe we should be adding some namespaces around or something like that. That's actually a fun problem because we don't know what kind of types we should be looking for. So it's not going to be the right ones. That's particularly interesting. So if we change this, we should be able to find the right assembly, but that's not the right way to do it. There's maybe a way to change the namespace maybe. So we say, instead of using my control here, we use another namespace. But the problem is that here, if someone just decides to define some of its own namespace, then the control may not be found again. And if we change the namespace, it's not going to be the right one either. So that doesn't work. Let's see.
So I don't think we have support for CLR namespace. I don't recall we do have that. Oh, we do have CLR namespace, but we only have CLR namespace. We don't have assembly or the assembly location, so we can't add that either. So we can filter it out. So if we do have, we can't use the assembly load context either, because the assembly load context, it doesn't change the default one, so we can't change the loading context so that the loaded assembly is going to be the right one. So that's not a good solution either. Okay, so for now, I think, yeah, so I don't think the trim is actually about removing the null that may get out of the get type. So that's basically the idea here. The thing is that in here, it's probably just the ordering that's not the right one. So if we were to be, say, the assemblies for the current loaded domain, we were looking, in reverse order, maybe. If we search for the last one that was loaded, maybe that would be the right one. But who's to say that get assembly is going to be returning the assemblies in the right order? That may not be the case. So maybe we should be able to provide a loading strategy for the Xaml Reader, but there's no API for this, so we can't do this either. That's an interesting thing. So maybe what we could do is have some kind of a namespace above. So let's say everything that's above here is not defined, and we inject the namespace maybe. So we say generated 01, and then we do something like this, which would make the controls always part of a new namespace, so we don't have to fiddle around which one is going to be loaded up. But the problem is that if we do this, then who's to say that the types in there are going to be the right ones? Well, that could work, because if I declare its second type, that could work, because the my control 2 would be working here. Let's see what's not working here. It says my control 3. It says text block is not available, of course, because I removed the namespace at the top. Okay. There's no entry point. So that's because we wanted to execute something, but there's nothing in there. So I don't think we do need to do this. I think it makes sense to say that, actually, does it? I don't know. Because if we put something in the default namespace here, there's not going to be a method that's going to be executable. So if I put a namespace at the top, it's not anymore a top level statement, so it's not something that will contain a main. That's particularly interesting that either. So let's say if I put a class there, that will work. So let's say if I do this and I change the fact that there's no main, that would be something to change. If I go back here, I could say that we have a local namespace, and we trick it with something that looks like this. Let's say auto-generated, something like that. And if we do this, then we can replace the auto-generated with something else. So no, there isn't, and that's the problem. So if you take a look at the way we're doing the loading, we're doing the loading using the Xaml Reader here. So I'm sorry, no, my apologies, not that. We're loading the assembly using compile, which is done using, here we have an assembly here. We're doing assembly.load. And the problem with the assembly.load is that it uses the default loading context to load the assembly. And what I don't know, so we could probably try to create that in a different loading context, but the problem is that the loader in the default context would not find the assembly. So there's something that is available as part of .NET Core. It's I think .NET Core 3.1 added this. You have something that's called the assembly load context, and if you're a veteran enough to be using .NET, it's something that looks like application domains in a sense. It's kind of lightweight application domains, where you can load stuff in there that's going to be outside of the current loading context. So you can do something like you can create a new loading context, and you can do whatever you want in there. But actually, starting to wonder, because there's a few things that we still need to do. So when you're loading something inside of an assembly loading assembly load context, everything that's going to be manipulated from there is going to be part of that assembly context. And the problem is that if you try to take those types that you've loaded there and move them to another context, then it will not be able to match types that are loaded from the main context with the new context that you created. So let's say if I do this and I create an application load context and I load the assembly from there, the problem is the XAML reader here will not be able to find. Well, actually, it's interesting. There's something there's something that I forgot about here. We're loading after we've compiled here, so it doesn't work. So there's something here. So maybe that's the issue that we had originally. So let's do this first instead of trying to figure if there's something that doesn't work. Let's swap this. So we're gonna try to see if the assembly load context is not the right one, and see if the new types that was loaded is the actually last loaded types. We'll see. But anyways, the assembly load context would be a way to unload files. But what I don't know is that if we load types from that new application load context using a reader that comes from that load context, if we take the types that are there and try to put them in the original load context, if it's still gonna work. And I would assume that it won't. Most probably because the types. So let's say you have an object from one load context and an object from another load context that are seemingly from the same type. They're going to be effectively different because they're not from the same load context. So not probably going to be able to match everything up that way. So that may be a problem. So we'll see. Okay, so let's try it again with our code that we have here. So I loaded everything up, so everything's lost. So I'm probably gonna have to do some copy pasting to avoid having to replace everything every time. Okay, so let's do this again. Okay, so I have a page. I have hello. That's not loaded, which is expected. And if I do my control here, so it still does hello, but it doesn't show anything here, probably because this doesn't find the type. Now, if I remove the class from here, and if I do hello, unable to find type hello, because it's not hello, it's my control, of course. Okay, so I have hello here. Now, what happens if I change the type again? No, okay, so it doesn't reload, which is what I expected. So now I need to change the type, and even if I create new versions of it,
It's not going to pick it up because it's not the first type, so that doesn't work. Okay, so we could still try with the assembly load context quickly to see if there's something we can do with this, but I'm pretty sure it's going to fail. But let's try it anyways. So let's say I create an assembly load context and I say load from stream. It's going to return an assembly. So the stream, I do have a stream, which is memory stream. That's good. So let's do. So I have a load context here, and let's return the assembly from there. So it's likely still going to work, but what I want to see is that if we create a control from there, do we have something that updates properly and loads? Because if it doesn't load in any way, there's no point in manipulating everything using assembly load context. So we're going to change this for another approach, like using a namespace at the top or some kind of a replacement somewhere, because it won't work any other way. Okay, so I've created a load context. So what I don't know is if I put it like this, it's probably going to be collected too soon. So let's actually put this as a static. Otherwise, it will do some funky stuff. Because it will probably collect the context before we stop using it. So that would be a problem. Okay. Okay, so reloading the application. I'm going to be pasting again my page that I had at the top. So I've got the compilation here. Oh, interesting. So that's a new one. I don't know what that is. We have my control, and we have an error with it, which is a 00x code. I don't know what that is. It got the compilation, but it seems to fail pretty miserably. Okay, so it looks like the loading doesn't work for some reason. Fails in a very weird way. So we're still doing from load stream. So this is an assembly. So I don't know which one fails. Maybe it's because an interesting thing is that the exception doesn't show. Oh, there it is. Okay. Bad image format exception. File name in memory assembly. That is interesting. Okay, so maybe the file was read the wrong way. Stream, it could be because we're at the end. Because we're at the end of the stream. Let's see. Let's put ourselves at the beginning. Could be something like this. Because we're writing it to the emit in a memory stream, but if you're doing it to array, then it doesn't care about the position. It just puts everything at the right location, so that's good. But if you're trying to read it again, it doesn't work because okay, unable to find type stack panel. Okay, so we got something interesting here. It works, and it shouldn't be. Well, at least for what I understood of what the assembly load context we're about to be doing. So let's see if I change this, what happens? So I still get hello. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not changing the right one. So it's still saying hello here. But what that could mean, though, is that the assembly load context that we're getting is compatible with the other one. So that could mean that we could go and load the XAML from the assembly load context and not from the
not from the main context. That could be something of interest. What is the select statement returning? You mean, what do you mean? Which location is it? I'm sorry. The select statement. You were which select statement are you talking about? Is it the one in the the current domain? Okay. You're saying that one. Okay. What is the select statement returning? So this one you're saying it's returning types. It's actually return types. And so that one is likely returning multiple versions of the same type because there are many assemblies that have, the same name or get name available, but it's likely not the right one. Okay, so let's see. We have here a load context. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new load context here. It's not the prettiest code for now, but we'll see. We'll see if that works, because if it does, it's gonna be very helpful. Okay, so we have our record here with the load context. So what we need to do. What do you think? Why do you think the trim is not working? So trim is basically filtering. If the select returns something that is null, then there's no output that's going to happen here in the first. So it's going to take, if the select returns a null value, a null element, then it's going to be removed from the output of the trim here. So it doesn't matter that much if there's a trim or not. If there are multiple elements, which is the case for what we're trying to do here, we have multiple types that match the name that we're getting because we have multiple assemblies loaded, then this is going to be returning just the first one. The select returns an enumerable of types. So let's see. So I have the compilation here, the compilation result, and compilation result is here. So what I need is, instead of using the Xaml Reader here, that type of Xaml Reader, I want to be able to use one that comes from the assembly load context of the other one. So is it something that we can do? So that I don't know. So let's go for compilation results. Load context, we're going to do a get type, if that works. Is there a get type? No, there isn't. Get type. No, there's load assembly, load from stream. Ah, I'm missing that one. So I don't know by heart how to find a type from there. I thought there was load from type, but that's not what I expected. Get assembly name. There's get type, there's get assemblies. So we still need to load an assembly from that context. So, well, let's try with load assembly name. So we're going to say get load context for assembly. That's not the one we want. Get assembly name, get assembly path. That's not the one we want either. Let's go for load with assembly name. Let's see what that one does. So what I want to do is get the Xaml Reader from the assembly load context. So load from assembly name. And the one that we want is uno.ui. Okay, and then from there, if we have it, what we want is get type. We want this type specifically, so it's, let's go pick up the full name. It's going to be easier. Windows UI markup dot Xaml Reader. So that's a reader. And then we want to do a load here. So we're going to do reader get method. The name is load. I think we do have multiple load methods. No, there's only one. Okay, so that makes it easier. And then from the load method, we're going to be invoking this to get a result. Load method.invoke. There's no instance because it's a static member. And then we need an array of objects, and we're going to be loading the XAML input that we have here. So we have a XAML input, and we're going to put that to the XAML reader. And we're just going to try it out to see if it does something. I'm not going to do any kind of validation here, just to see what that does. And afterwards, we're going to be doing if to make sure that we have everything and that we're loading the right type. Did I press F5? I pressed F5. I shouldn't have. Okay. Okay, so this time what do we have? Exception thrown by an invocation something. Unable to find stack panel. So that is expected somehow, I would guess. Yeah, that's expected. So let's change for the page that we have here. It worked. There were no exceptions. So that's particularly interesting. Okay, so that if there are no exceptions, that means that all the types could be found. The reader worked, the load method worked, and we have our XAML here. So what we could do is just replace R1 by R2. So let's do this. We're going to be replacing this that we don't use by we're going to be naming the load context so that we know what we're doing. Compilation result, load context. And there's a name for it. There you go. And let's see if we see something. Because now what we've done is we have the XAML reader type that comes from another application domain. No, I'm sorry, another load context. And it may not have issues finding the assemblies that we just built. That could be the one that we want. Okay, so there's an exception. So what's the exception? Unable to find stack panel. Yeah. Looks like I broke something. Let's try it again. Maybe I was too fast. Let's see. Okay, so I got the compilation and it failed again, which is good. Oh, not that. I want the page that I need. And it worked. Okay, so let's see if I do hello2. Nope, doesn't work. Okay, so so it actually did not change anything. So it loaded from another context, but it didn't use the right assembly for some reason. So I don't understand properly how the XAML load context, the load context does work. It's probably not doing the right thing. Because it's definitely loading another version of the control, which is definitely not the right one. Because we have the load method from the markup reader that we got from another load context, and it's definitely not the right one. What we could do, there's a method that's coming from load context.
Well, I can't so I can't reorder the trim at this point. I would need to I could, but I need to rebuild Uno to get there. So we could try that afterwards, but we could probably do that modification to see if that works. But it would have been easier if the load context would work, but that's not the case. So we're probably gonna have to do the reordering to see where that goes. The one last thing that we can try is see where the type comes from. And in that one, we have so the trim here is actually not a method that comes from. It's an extension that's inside of Uno. Basically does this. So it's not a trim in a sense that it does remove the beginning and the end. It's just removes the probably badly named. It's where not null more than trim. It's been there for a while, so and that's why it's probably not going to do anything. Probably should have started from there in the first place, but that's why it's not probably going to do anything. I think it's probably the ordering here that would make sense to provide a way to search for assemblies, but or maybe we could do something like provide an additional load context for the Xaml Reader. I don't know if there's nothing that we can provide here. There's nothing here that says what to load from where. So yeah, there's no context. So what I'm going to try is as the last result. So original load context, because there's a method in load context, in an assembly load context, that can tell from which assembly load context the type is coming from. So let's see. Assembly load context. And if I say get load context, that works. So if I say r2 dot assembly, get type assembly dot name, that should work. So this one's going to tell me where the load context, well, from the load context of that assembly, which one I'm manipulating, and if it's actually the right one. So let's see if it helps. Because the output of this, because it's coming from a different load context, it should be an assembly that comes from that context. But if it isn't, then it's not good. It's not a good solution. Okay, so that fails because of the page that we don't have. Original load context default. There we go. Okay, so that's why. I don't know how that's supposed to be working, to be honest. If I remember correctly, the ability to change the load context would be that if you're doing reflection, you should be doing it using a provided load context and not using loaded assemblies in some ways. Maybe it's because the static member that comes from, when we're loading here, when we're loading from here, let's see the Xaml resolver here. We're using app domain, current domain. Probably shouldn't be doing this. Maybe we should be using assembly load context instead. But we don't have that because we're inside of a net standard 2. I don't think we have assembly load context from there. Let's see. Assembly load context. No, we don't have that. I don't think we do have a way to get that from. Oh, there's system runtime loader. Would that exist? Okay, so if that exists, then maybe we can do something about it. Let's see. So it tries to load system runtime loader. It's probably something that comes from the facades of Mono Android. It's probably not the particularly useful one, but maybe there's a NuGet package that provides that system runtime loader.
System runtime loader. Let's see. Wait, try to add a NuGet package from there. Actually, let's use our friend NuGet.info. So we said assembly load context should be coming from system runtime loader. So if it's available from here, system runtime loader. Do we have it? Yes, it's available. Is it usable? That would be the question. Okay, so let's try it. Let's see what that does. So if we're in there, let's add the package reference to this one. So we're calling system loader. The version is 4.3.0. And the XAML type resolver, do we have something else? So maybe we can have some kind of an ambient loader that we could change, maybe. We could probably do something about it so that the loader uses something different. So maybe we can fix that one and have our own loader without having to hack too much around. Assembly load context. No, it doesn't do anything. So maybe, okay, so let's find system runtime loader. Maybe I don't have the right namespace somehow, or maybe it's not available completely. I don't know. System runtime load. Skia. It says system runtime loader. Should have been doing something, so it doesn't do anything. So let's see. If we go take a look at the assemblies from that package, what do we see? System runtime loader. It uses system compile time assemblies. Okay. So what's in that one? What's in that assembly? It looks fine. Do I spy? Not here. There we go. Let's go and take a look inside to see if we have the assemblies that we need, the types that we need. So we have system runtime assembly load context, which is good. What methods do we have? We have a few static ones. We have assembly load context, so it should be available. We still don't have. We have the assembly load context, but I don't know if we should be able to do this. So let's say that get load context would be working and that we could do assembly load from this one. So let's say that the loader to be used to load the types is a different one. And that we're using the one that the XAML type resolver is using. So that could be some interesting. Okay, so let's see the assembly load context we have. So in here, that it's not available for some reason. Let's see if I build. What does it do? Because it may be just IntelliSense just playing tricks. That could be. So if that still doesn't work, and it's likely to not going to work, we're gonna have to do something different. And probably the original one, which is just go and find what we can get with the replacing of namespaces, is going to be the appropriate solution at this point.
Otherwise, we won't be able to find which assembly is going to be needed. It is going to need to be loaded. But still, so system. That's because it's not the right namespace. There you go. So if we do global, that's going to help assembly load context. Okay, so that's good. Okay, so we have assembly load context here. What do we have other? We have assembly extension. Try get metadata. It's not particularly useful. Okay. Okay, so what we're going to try is add an additional loader here. So this is the main one. We're trying to get types one after the other and trying to get the type from its name. And if we find it using its name directly, then it matches directly, and that's good. But in some cases, it may not work properly. So, if we have a different loading context, then we should prefer the loading context of the Xaml type resolver. It could be something like this. So let's try to see if we can figure one out like this. So let's put back the original current domain lookup, and we're going to add this one, and we're going to do we're going to get the context from the current type. Let's I don't think we are in a class where we're in instance. We're an instance. Okay, so let's do get type assembly. Okay, and then we can do dot assemblies. I think. No, it's not that. We don't have we don't have the full assembly list. That's a problem. Okay, so we have a load context, but we don't have a way to get the assemblies from there. So we can't enumerate the assemblies. So that's not good. We can't enumerate the assemblies. We can't get them that way. Yeah, that's a problem there. We could do some reflection again. That's not particularly nice either. Because if we do reflection, we could go and get the assembly load context if there's any underneath. Let's try it anyways. Let's try it anyways and see if it works. It's ugly as hell. But let's see if we can still get something to work there. So we get context. And in the context, so we're going to get there's a member that's called assemblies that lists the assemblies. And so if we look at this one, we have an enumerable of assemblies here. Now the problem is that if we do enumerate this one, we're going to have the wrong type. So that may not be... That may not be good. Do we have another one that allows us to enumerate the assemblies? Not necessarily. So if an enumerable, it's enumerable. So okay, so that could work either, because we get the assembly. That's going to be a lot of reflection. Because we're gonna get the assembly, but the problem is that we can't use the type of assembly that's coming from here. It may not be the right one. Let's try it. Let's try it anyways. Okay, so we're going to do context dot get type and get property, and the property is name assemblies. Yeah, it's named assemblies.
And then in this one, we can do assemblies property dot get value, not get value. Property info get value. So it's a property that coming from context. It's an instance property. This is the actual assemblies. And maybe we can cast that as a I enumerable of assembly. So let's see. That may not work, so we'll see what that does. Okay, and then for the assemblies, we return everything up. We return the first or default of this. That looks like a very long stretch, so it may not be functioning properly. So what we're going to do is change the version of Uno that's used by the playground here, and the version of the playground that we were using is 4.2.5. So let's go for this one. And we're also building for WebAssembly, so let's change the filter. Yes, there's an unload method for ALC, so that's why it makes it so interesting. That's why I'm still trying to get there, because I don't want to have to. I want to be able to load anything and not just a modified version of the code that you're writing in the code editor. That's the main idea behind the lookup for the assembly load context. And I'm actually trying to figure out how to load to use the assembly load context, because it's been, I haven't seen a lot of code that uses assembly load context, and it behaves quite differently from application domains. It's definitely not the same. There are good reasons for the .NET team to have removed this. Still, it was a useful class, and I would have liked to have it more available a bit more for .NET Core, but it's not there. So that's the idea. Okay, so let's see. I've made my change here, and we're gonna try to see if we can get this to be loading what we need. I should probably have been. Let's. Is it building there yet? I don't think it is. Yeah, it's still not starting. Okay, so let's write something in the console for now. Just gonna write something in the console to say that we're trying to load name. Oop. There. We're fast enough. Yeah, we're fast enough. Okay, so we're trying to see if we're actually running from here. I just don't want to go and debug all this that's coming from here. But so the idea would be that if we're able to load everything from the ALC, and that the type resolution all comes from the ALC, which looks like it did for some reason, then we may be able to unload the types, or actually limit the scope of the search for the type to the assembly that we loaded from the assembly context. That would be the best. But I'm not too sure if that's what we're going to be able to get to. Okay, so looks like we're having some issue there, probably because we have the application running here. So let's terminate this for now. Let's do a rebuild and build again. Because if your application is still running, and because of a hot reload and things like that, many of the files are locked, and you can't override the version of your Uno that you have on your machine with you cannot use that version of the just build Uno with the version that is inside a NuGet package. So it causes all sorts of trouble there. But with this, that should do. Okay, so it's still building. Yeah, still building. Okay. Okay, so otherwise, okay, the build failed because loader doesn't exist. What did I do? Oh, yes, I remember now. Because I changed the other file. I changed the Skia one, but I need to change the Wasm one. So I can do this here. So if we can actually unload the files, the assemblies that we loaded, that would be nice. But I mean, that's not a big deal. It's just that, if you're keeping the playground alive for a very long time, then you may be loading and loading and loading and loading and have the memory go up for no good reason. But if we actually can unload properly, that would be very nice. Now, what I don't know is that if we have to have all the types, collected or things like that, let's say if you have a type that needs to be finalized, do we have to wait for the garbage collector to have finalized that type? My assumption would be that it's probably something like this, or maybe if you ask for an unload, then it queues up all the unload. Maybe that's one of the questions that I have. It's still unanswered at this point, so you can try to figure this one out with that change. So on the other part, so the other thing that we could be doing is say that instead of loading the text of the syntax tree directly like this, when we're parsing it, then we do something like, for instance, updated source, and then we do namespace, and we put the source in there, and then we create a new temporary namespace that we call with the new maybe not a GUID at this point. Well, we could actually do it with a GUID. So let's say it's called like this, new GUID, and with a bit of replace, otherwise replace the dashes with nothing. That works. So that would be the temporary namespace, and then we could create a namespace like this. And then the updated source would be loading this. So everything that you would put in your C# file would be in that custom namespace. That would work. The thing is that if you're trying to load the files that are from that temporary namespace from the outside, you would have to know that namespace explicitly. So maybe that's not a big deal. I don't know. I've not figured out all the details for that, but that could be something that we could do. Okay, so the build worked. Okay, so that's good. And we are at we have the runtime WebAssembly that's built. We can stop the build at this point. That should be enough. Okay, so now if we do rebuild, we should be having the new loader updated. So let's do a full rebuild to make sure that we're picking up the actual, the proper files. Just validating quickly that we're overriding at the right place. That's it. So you can see that when you're overriding the NuGet cache, when overriding to debug Uno inside of another app, you have the overriding NuGet package message, overriding NuGet package cache message that shows up that tells you which version is being overridden. So if you're not sure what happens, then you can you do know for sure what's happening there. Okay, so let's reload and see if we have our new loader going up at the right place. Got compilation, entry point, got compilation, nothing. Okay, so because it failed, because we don't have a main, which is fine. Okay, so we're actually loading from an ALC. Okay, so that's good. What I don't know is that if we're actually loading from the right thing. So we're loading from a namespace that doesn't make sense. So let's use the right namespace, because at that point, let's put an actual full namespace. So namespace. I'm gonna call it tests for now. That's test, and so it's still loaded in default. Maybe that's not the issue, but let's say. And we're gonna add a new namespace here. We're gonna call test, and it's supposed to be using with the namespace test. And the control that we want to load is supposed to be in that namespace. Okay, so it's loading from that one. Doesn't seem to be giving something interesting. So if we change this, do we have a second one? No, we don't. Okay, so it's still not loading from the right context, but maybe we're not finding the right things. Could be. So let's go and add some more logging there to see if we're enumerating the right things. Could be that we're not. So we're trying to find assemblies from there. Try to do a get type from this. Oh, the name is not the right one. So we're searching for test on my control. Is that something that we can't find? That I don't know. So let's see. Let's convert the whole thing into the whole lambda into a block, so we can see the values that we get. And so we do a.get type or get type with original name. Okay, so that's good. Assembly. No, it's type. And we should be returning type. So let's be a bit blunt here. We're searching the assembly called a.name, the full name. And we're searching for name. And we got type. So do we get an actual type? Maybe we're not getting any type. That could be definitely be possible. So let's do it again. Let's see if we have something different. Because it doesn't look like we're actually loading something. So maybe it's one of the the lookups that are not the right ones. And maybe if we're not finding anything, maybe we're falling back to the current domain lookup. Could be. So what we're going to do is also copy the text. Copying the text from here, so we don't repeat. We're going to copy the C# as well. Okay, so it's building. There we go. Okay. So go here and let's try again and see what are we loading.
And what do we get from that loading context? Okay, so got our compilation is going to fail because of something. Okay, so we got a lot of stuff here. We're searching, but not finding anything, which is fine. So let's put the right C# and XAML back. Okay, so we're trying to find in all the assemblies that we have. There are a lot of loaded stuff there. So let's see if we just do one more modification and just look up there are lots of assemblies. Okay, so we're searching for test my control in that assembly load context. But maybe we're not looking the right one either. I didn't put that name. So do we see, we should be seeing in memory something. Do we see in memory? We don't see in memory. So that's probably the problem, because we're not searching, or maybe we're searching in the wrong load context. So that could be a problem. Okay, so how do we provide the load context to that location? That I don't know. So we're going to have to figure that one out. Let's see, current domain. So we're actually going in there, and the load context from that type, the current type, is definitely not the right one, because it would have found the right instance, but it looks like it's not doing so. So it's doing get load context for one specific assembly, but it's not returning the right one. Which is interesting, because I created the Xaml Reader using the right using this. So it's the load method from that assembly that comes from that load context. So it should have been giving us the right loading context, but it's not. Okay, so that will be for next week, because it's the mystery of the week for the load context. So if you have any information about the assembly load context in between, let me know on Twitter. Maybe there's going to be something that we can look up to see if we're loading or using the assembly load context in the right way. Looks like it's not in that case. So let's figure this out for next week. So I hope you had fun as much as I did. It was very interesting and educative. So I'll see you next week, and until then, happy coding. Bye for now.